So this family buys a storage locker at an auction, hoping to find some cool vintage gear or maybe a few antiques they can flip for a profit. And instead, they open a suitcase and find the literal stuff of nightmares. I'm not talking about old clothes or broken electronics. I'm talking about human remains. Two small children, folded up, stored like winter coats. And here's the part that will make you sick. These kids had been in there for 4 years. Nobody knew they were missing. Not the neighbors, not the school, not the extended family. These two little kids just vanished from the face of the earth, and the only person who knew where they were was their own mother, who was busy living her best life on a completely different continent, flying business class and getting makeovers, while her children were rotting in a storage unit in South Auckland. This is the story of the suitcase murders, and if you think you've heard messed up stories before, trust me, you are not ready for how dark this one gets. We are talking about Hakyung Lee, a woman who goes from being a doting suburban mom to a cold-blooded family annihilator who poisoned her own kids, packed them into luggage, and then ghosted the entire country of New Zealand. And the wildest part? She almost got away with it. She spent years living as a free woman in South Korea, probably thinking she'd successfully erased her past. But as we all know, you can't hide a secret that smells this bad forever. Boom. Let's get into it. So picture this. It's August 11th, 2022. We're in Clendon Park, South Auckland, New Zealand. There's this regular family, innocent people just trying to make a buck, who decide to bid on the contents of an abandoned storage unit. You know the vibe. It's like Storage Wars. You pay the fee, you get the contents, and you hope you find something valuable. Maybe some jewelry, maybe some power tools. You definitely don't expect to find a crime scene. So this family wins the auction for a unit at the Safe Store facility in Papatoe. They hook up their trailer, load up all the boxes and junk, and drive it back to their house. They're excited. They're going through the hall in their front yard, sorting the trash from the treasure. And then they get to these two suitcases. Now, these aren't just overnight bags. They are large, heavy suitcases. And as they pull them out of the trailer, they notice a smell. And let me tell you, if you have never smelled decomposition, be grateful. It is a smell that hits you in the back of the throat and stays there. But these suitcases had been sealed tight, stored in a dark, dry unit for years. So the smell was contained. Until it wasn't. They unzip the first suitcase. And I want you to imagine the trauma of this moment. They're expecting clothes, maybe blankets. Instead, they see human body parts. Can you imagine? You're just trying to flip some used goods and suddenly you're staring at a dead child. The family immediately calls the police. They are freaking out. The neighbors see the police swarm the property. The trailer is cordoned, the hazmat suits come out, and pretty quickly the cops open the second suitcase and find the second child. Let me ask you a question real quick. If you bought a storage unit and found a locked suitcase that smelled weird, are you opening it? Or are you calling the cops immediately? Tell me in the comments, because I feel like the curiosity would kill me, but also I've seen enough horror movies to know nothing good is in that bag. The police clear the family who bought the unit immediately. These guys are just victims of the worst luck in history. But now the cops have a massive problem. They have two bodies. They are small, they are decomposed, and they have absolutely no idea who they are. This triggers one of the most intense forensic investigations New Zealand has ever seen. They have to identify these kids, but remember, they've been dead for years. The storage unit fees hadn't been paid in a long time, which is why it went to auction. So the cops start working backward. Who rented the unit? When was it last accessed? And the answers they find are heartbreaking. DNA testing confirms the bodies belong to two siblings, a girl, Yuna Jo, who was born in 2009, and a boy, Minu Jo, born in 2012. When they died, Yuna was roughly 8 years old. Minu was 6. Just babies. And when police look at the rental records for the storage unit, they see the name of the person who put them there. The mother, Hakyung Lee, or as she was known back then, Jasmine. Now, to understand how a mother ends up stuffing her kids into suitcases, we have to go back. We have to look at who Hakyung Lee was before she became New Zealand's most hated woman. Hakyung Lee, who was known as Jasmine, moved to New Zealand from South Korea years prior. And by all accounts, she was living the dream. She was married to a guy named Ian Jo. They had these two beautiful kids, Yuna and Minu. They lived in a nice house in Auckland. They were part of the community. People who knew them back then described them as a golden family. You know the type. The parents who are always at the school events, the kids are well-dressed, polite, doing well in class. Ian, the dad, was a businessman. Jasmine was a stay-at-home mom who was obsessed with her kids' education. Teachers said she was intense about it, always wanting them to succeed. It looked perfect, but as we know, perfect is usually just a coat of paint over a rotting wall. The cracks started to show around 2017, and the catalyst wasn't drugs or a cult or an affair. It was cancer. Ian Joe, the father, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It was aggressive, and despite everything they tried, he passed away in late 2017. Now, grief does strange things to people. We all know that. Losing a spouse is devastating. But what happened to Jasmine wasn't just grief. It was a complete and total psychological collapse. According to friends and family, Jasmine just broke. She had been reliant on Ian for everything. He was the breadwinner, the rock, the connection to the outside world. When he died, she was left alone in a country that wasn't her homeland, with 2 young kids to raise by herself. She started to isolate. She stopped talking to her friends. She stopped answering the phone. The Golden family turned into a ghost house. The curtains were drawn. The mail piled up. And this is where things get really dark, because usually when a parent struggles, the community steps in, or the school notices something. But Jasmine was clever. She pulled the kids out of school. She told people they were going overseas. She created this bubble of silence around the house. And inside that house, things were spiraling into madness. Real quick, hit subscribe, because we are about to get into the details of the crime itself, and trust me, you will not want to miss how this unfolds. So we're in early 2018 now. Ian has been dead for a few months. Jasmine is alone with Yuna and Minu. And according to the evidence that came out later in court, she wasn't just sad. She was becoming delusional. She started to believe that she couldn't survive without her husband, and in her twisted logic, she decided that if she couldn't survive, the kids couldn't either. This is a phenomenon we see in family annihilators, this narcissistic idea that the children are extensions of the parent, and if the parent's life is over, the children's lives must be over too. It's not mercy, it's ownership. In June 2018, Jasmine went to the doctor, but she wasn't getting help for her psychosis. She was getting a prescription for nortriptyline. It's an older antidepressant, but in high doses, it can be toxic. She didn't just get a little bit, she got enough to kill. The exact date of the murders is believed to be sometime in late June 2018. Imagine the scene. You have these 2 kids, 6 and 8 years old. They've already lost their dad. They're probably confused why mom is acting so weird, why they aren't going to school anymore. They trust her. She's the only person they have left in the world. And one day, she makes them a drink. Maybe it was juice, maybe it was milk, but she laces it with a lethal dose of the medication. She feeds it to them, and she watches them die. Now, later in court, she would try to claim this was a botched murder-suicide. She claimed she planned to kill herself too, but she woke up and the kids were dead and she was still alive. She tried to paint herself as a victim of her own mental health. But what would she paint that would be easy for anyone to listen to?
But look at her actions after the kids died. Does a grieving, confused, suicidal mother do what she did next? She didn't call the police. She didn't call an ambulance. She didn't scream for help. She went shopping. This is the part that proves, to me at least, that she knew exactly what she was doing. After her children were dead, Jasmine Lee didn't mourn them, she packed them. She took their small bodies, remember, 6 and 8 years old, and she wrapped them in layers of plastic. She taped them up, and then she shoved them into suitcases. Think about the physics of that for a second. Think about the cold, hard reality of forcing your own child's body into a piece of luggage. It requires effort. It requires a level of detachment that is psychopathic. And she didn't just leave them in the house. She rented a storage unit at Safe Store Papatoto. She transported the suitcases there. She stacked them in the locker, surrounded by other household junk, toys, a pram, boxes of clothes. She created a tomb for them in a metal box in an industrial park. And then she erased them. She started telling people the kids were with relatives. She told the landlord they were moving back to Korea. She cleaned the house, and then she went on a spending spree. I'm serious. In the days after murdering her children, her credit card records show she spent thousands of dollars. She bought a new wardrobe. She spent $900 at a hair salon getting a makeover. She bought a one-way business class ticket to Seoul. Does that sound like a woman incapacitated by grief? Or does that sound like a woman celebrating her freedom? She treated the death of her children like a divorce. She just moved on. She got on that plane in July 2018. She sat in business class, drinking champagne, eating the nice airline food, flying 11 hours back to South Korea. And she left her children rotting in a storage unit in New Zealand. And nobody knew. For the next 4 years, Hakyung Lee lived in South Korea. She changed her name legally to Hakyung Lee, dropping the Jasmine. She reconnected with old acquaintances, but she kept her life in New Zealand a complete secret. She was living a lie. If anyone asked about the kids, she had excuses. Oh, they're studying in New Zealand. They're with their dad's family. Meanwhile, back in New Zealand, the storage fees were being paid automatically for a while, but eventually the money ran out. The automatic payments failed. The storage company tried to contact her, no answer. They sent emails, no answer. So, according to the contract, when you stop paying, your stuff gets auctioned. And that brings us back to the poor family in Clendon Park. It's 2022. 4 years have passed. The kids would have been 10 and 12 by now, but they are frozen in time in those suitcases. When the news broke in August 2022, it went global. Bodies of children found in suitcases. It was everywhere. And the moment the police identified them as Yuna and Minu, the clock started ticking for Hakyung Lee. The New Zealand police contacted South Korean authorities. Interpol issued a red notice. This wasn't just a domestic case anymore, this was an international manhunt. But Hakyung Lee wasn't exactly a criminal mastermind. She was living in Ulsan, a city in the southeast of Korea. She was staying in an apartment, living a quiet life. She probably thought she had gotten away with it. She probably thought that because the bodies were hidden, they'd never be found, or if they were, nobody would connect it to her. But DNA doesn't lie, and storage unit contracts have paper trails. In September 2022, Korean police raided her apartment. There's video footage of the arrest. They find her hiding with a coat over her head, being led away in handcuffs. She looks small. She looks pathetic. She's shouting at the reporters, "I didn't do it! I didn't do it!" Classic. The denial is strong with this one. She fought extradition for a bit, but the evidence was overwhelming. In November 2022, she was put on a plane back to New Zealand. And guess who was sitting next to her? 3 detectives. It wasn't business class this time. The trial finally happened in 2024 and 2025. And this is where we got to see the full extent of her delusion. She represented herself for part of it, which is always a terrible idea, but eventually had lawyers. Her defense was wild. She tried to claim she was insane. She tried to claim she had planned to die with them, and it was a tragedy that she survived. She told the court that she snapped after her husband died. Her lawyers argued that she was suffering from severe depression and PTSD. They painted a picture of a woman who was so broken by grief that she lost touch with reality. But the prosecution? They brought receipts. They showed the jury the timeline. June 2018, she researches the poison. Late June, she kills the kids. July, she buys the suitcases. She moves the bodies. She books the flight. She gets the makeover. The prosecutor, Natalie Walker, was ruthless. She asked the jury, "Is this the behavior of a woman who lost her mind, or is this the behavior of a woman who cleaned up a mess?" They argued that Jasmine Lee killed her children because they were a burden. With her husband gone, she didn't want to be a single mom. She wanted a fresh start. She wanted to go back to Korea and live a single life, and the kids were in the way. It's the Susan Smith defense. It's the Casey Anthony vibe. It's that chilling idea that a mother could love her freedom more than her own offspring. And the jury, they didn't buy the insanity plea for a second. It took them very little time to come back with a verdict. Guilty. 2 counts of murder. Just recently, in late 2025, Hakyung Lee stood before the High Court in Auckland for sentencing. The judge, Justice Jeffrey Venning, didn't hold back. He called her actions cruel and callous. He talked about the breach of trust. These kids looked to her for protection, and she fed them poison. He sentenced her to life imprisonment, but in New Zealand, life doesn't always mean life. However, he slapped her with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. That means she will be an old woman before she even has a chance to ask for freedom. She will sit in a cell in New Zealand, thousands of miles away from the country she tried to flee to. And she will have a long, long time to think about those suitcases. But is 17 years enough? For 2 lives? For the terror those kids must have felt? For the indignity of being stored like garbage for 4 years? You tell me. If you were the judge, what sentence are you giving her? Put it in the comments. I'm thinking they should throw away the key, but maybe that's just me. The thing that haunts me the most about this story isn't even the murder itself. It's the storage unit.
Think about what a storage unit is. It's a place where we put things we don't want to look at right now, but we don't want to throw away. It's a limbo. Hakyung Lee put her children in limbo. She didn't bury them. She didn't cremate them. She boxed them up and paid a monthly fee to keep them in the dark. It's a level of objectification that is hard to comprehend. She turned her children into luggage. And for 4 years, life went on around that unit. People drove past the facility every day. Other people rented units nearby, moving their old couches and Christmas decorations in and out, completely unaware that 2 dead children were sleeping just a few feet away. It's a reminder that we never really know what's happening behind closed doors, or in this case, behind roll-up metal doors. The family who found them, I can't even imagine the therapy bills. They were just trying to participate in the gig economy, trying to get a deal, and they ended up solving a double homicide. They are the unsung heroes here, honestly. If they hadn't bought that unit, if the fees had been paid for another 10 years, Hakyung Lee might have lived her whole life in Korea without ever facing justice. People always ask in cases like this, how did nobody notice? And that is the question we have to answer. How do 2 kids disappear from school, from the neighborhood, and nobody calls the cops for 4 years? It shows how easy it is to fall through the cracks. Jasmine Lee exploited the privacy laws. She exploited the fact that people don't want to pry. She told a lie, we're moving overseas, and everyone just accepted it. We need to be better at checking in on each other. If your neighbor's kids suddenly vanish, maybe ask a question. If your friend stops answering calls after her husband dies, maybe knock on the door. Hakyung Lee is a monster, yes, but she thrived in the silence that we all create when we mind our own business a little too much. So, that's the story of the suitcase murders. It's dark, it's twisted, and it's a tragedy of epic proportions. 2 little kids, Minu and Yuna, who deserve to grow up, who deserve to go to school and have friends and lives. Instead, they became evidence in one of the most disturbing cases in New Zealand history. If this story messed you up as much as it messed me up, hit that like button. It helps the channel and it helps us tell more of these stories that need to be heard. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications because the world is a crazy place and I'm here to guide you through it. But wait, we are not done. Because to really understand this case, we need to go deeper into the psychology of Hakyung Lee and the details of the trial that the mainstream news just grazed over. We need to talk about the why. The psychology of a family annihilator. Psychologists have been studying cases like this for decades, and Hakyung Lee fits a very specific profile. It's called altruistic filicide. I know, it sounds contradictory.
How can killing your kids be altruistic? In the killer's mind, they aren't committing a crime. They are saving the children. In Jasmine's warped reality, the world without her husband was a living hell. It was pain. It was suffering. And she believed that by killing her children, she was sparing them from that pain. She wrote notes. She had a diary. And in those pages, she wasn't writing like a villain in a movie. She was writing like a woman who was drowning. She wrote about how much she loved them. She wrote about how she wanted them to be at peace. Does that make it okay? Hell no. But it explains why she didn't just run away and leave them at an orphanage. She wanted to take them with her. Until she didn't. See, that's where the altruistic theory falls apart for me. If she really wanted to save them from the pain of the world, why did she leave them in a suitcase? Why didn't she give them a proper burial? Why did she let them rot while she got a perm? That's where the narcissism comes in. The Save the Children Act was just that, an act. A story she told herself to justify getting rid of the burden. In the trial, forensic psychiatrists argued back and forth. The defense experts said she had severe depressive disorder with psychotic features. They said she heard voices. They said she was dissociated. But the Crown's experts said, nah. They pointed to her organization. You don't successfully navigate international travel, import-export laws, and lease agreements if you are totally dissociated from reality. You might be depressed, sure, but you are functional. And a functional murderer is still a murderer. The evidence left behind. Let's talk about the digital trail, because this woman left breadcrumbs everywhere. Police found her internet search history. And guys, it is always the search history. If you are ever planning a crime, which please don't, remember that Google never forgets. She was searching for how to overdose. She was searching for toxic doses of antidepressants. She was searching for flight schedule to Korea. It was premeditated. It wasn't a snap decision. She sat at her computer in the house where her children were sleeping, and she researched how to kill them. That is cold. That is calculated. And the suitcases? They matched suitcases she already owned, but she went out and bought more. She had to figure out the logistics. Will they fit? How do I seal them? There is a level of gruesome practicality to it that makes your skin crawl. She had to handle the bodies. She had to manipulate them. That is a tactile, physical reality that she had to endure. And she did it. The safe store irony. Can we just pause on the name of the facility? Safe store. It's ironic, right? It was the safest place for her secrets, but the most dangerous place for those kids. Storage units are fascinating places. They're the graveyards of American and New Zealand consumerism. We buy too much stuff, so we pay rent to house it. But they're also perfect for hiding things. In the US, we've seen bodies in storage units before. It happens more often than you think. Why? Because it buys time. If you bury a body in the woods, a hiker might find it tomorrow. If you put it in a storage unit and pay the bill, you have bought yourself months, maybe years of silence. Hakyung Lee bought 4 years. That is a lifetime in criminal justice terms. It allowed the evidence to degrade. It allowed memories to fade. If the autopsy hadn't been able to find the poison, which is a miracle of forensic science after 4 years, she might have gotten away with it. Because after 4 years, a cause of death is hard to prove. There's no soft tissue left. There's just bones and residue. But luckily, hair and bone marrow hold on to toxins. The science caught her. The cultural aspect. There was a lot of talk in the media about the cultural aspect, the shame of being a widow in Korean culture, or the pressure to be a perfect mother. Some people tried to argue that the isolation was cultural, that as an immigrant, she didn't have the support network. And that's true. New Zealand is a welcoming place, but it can be lonely if you don't speak the language perfectly, or if your community is small. But let's be real. There are millions of immigrant mothers who lose their husbands and struggle with poverty and isolation, and they don't poison their kids and put them in Samsonite luggage. Culture explains the context, but it doesn't excuse the crime.